Okej, då är vi igång. Då vill jag först önska er alla välkomna till Renewcells första Capital Markets Day. Där vi kommer gå igenom this is supposed to be in English. So welcome everyone to Renewcell's first Capital Markets Day. We will be three presenters today. It will be me, Patrik Lundström, I'm CEO of Renewcell, and we will have Tricia Carey, who is our CCO, Chief Commercial Officer, and we have Toby Lawton, who is our CFO. We also have in the room today our Chairman of the Board, Michael Berg, and I'd like to give the word to Michael for a few minutes for a short presentation. Please welcome Michael.
Thank you, Patrik. Thank you, and welcome to all of you. So great to have you all here. This is Renewcell's very first Capital Markets Day, and we're very proud to have you here and to show you our factory and a little bit about what we're doing. So I'm not looking at my emails if you thought that. I made some notes here in order not to be too long-winded. So during the day, the team will give you a little bit of an update on where we are today with the current business, some glimpses into our thoughts about the future. We will of course show you our factory that we're very proud of, and we will have time for Q&A and some discussions as well. So that's the day. Before I hand back to Patrik, I'd like to just give a little bit of personal reflection of why I am standing here. So I've been chairman of Renewcell for almost a year now. And prior to this, I've been CEO for a number of companies for the past 20 years. And in addition, I have roughly 30 years of experience as chairman from both publicly listed companies, family-owned companies, and private equity companies. Why do I say this? Well, you know, we're all spending a fairly high share of our lives working. And personally, I think it's very important what I spend this time on. So whenever I'm approached about a new position, I try to evaluate this from three different perspectives: profit, fun, and some kind of do good. So to me, profit, that means that the company is in a good market, have a very solid and good business model, have great products that all results in a strong potential for shareholder value creation, including value creation for myself as a shareholder. And I rarely take on assignments where I see the long-term value creation potential of less than 7 to 10 times, right? And I always invest in the cases I go into. So I've put in about 30 million SEK in a Bartainer because I think this is a very good case. So second criteria, fun. This means to me that it should be a good team on the board and a good management team. And the company should have interesting products and markets. But also that the case itself is something that I can be proud of being part of. And all this I have found in Renewcell. So finally, the do good part, to me this has become increasingly important in the last few years as the challenges for our planet really is increasing almost exponentially. So the fashion industry is one of the highest emitters of CO2 globally. And there really are very, very few solutions to this. So Renewcell's technology to create a truly circular system in fashion and in textiles in general is a possibility to seriously have a positive and a real global impact on sustainability. And I think it's a privilege to be part of this. So finally, starting up a new major process business with a complex, gigantic hardware such as we have in the Renewcell factory is never very straightforward. So even though we have built and started up the factory in Ortviken in really record speed, the road for sure has had some bumps. And I'm sure we're going to have some more bumps going into the future. But we are progressing steadily towards our goals. And we have also over the last year substantially de-risked the business. So we think we have a great future. So I hope that by the end of today, you will feel that you have gotten some more insight and maybe also inspiration. And I'm really looking very much forward to having discussions with you throughout the day. Very, very nice to have you here. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Really appreciate it. The agenda for today is that we will start off with a strategic update, which I will hold myself. And then from there, we're going to get some statements for accelerating circularity with guest speakers whom we have on filming, let's say. Then Tricia is going to give us an understanding on the commercial strategy and what we're doing on the market, which is quite interesting the way we are moving that forward, and Tricia has done tremendous contribution already since she started. Then we're going to have a short coffee break, and then we're going to have a value chain video. It's a new video, so you haven't seen it before. And then we have the investment case, and Toby will go through the numbers with you. Then we're going to have a short summary and then Q&As. And then after that, we're going to go to the plant, and we're going to go through the plant. You're going to get the safety briefing on the bus as we go in there. And then we're going to go through the plant, and then we're going to take you back to the train. We know that your train is leaving, at least for many of you, at 5:06, and we will make sure that you get there on time. The questions that we have throughout the day, please don't ask them as we go forward, because we have people on that are streaming right now, and so send in your questions. Also, the people who are on the streaming, please have a go at your questions, but we won't be able to answer them throughout the presentation. But there will be a Q&A in the end of this presentation. And send them into this email contact. Also, you in the auditorium, please send in your questions, and you can of course also answer, put them forward as we speak throughout the day. Strategic update then. So what we do, we make fashion circular. I think everybody's interested in how is it going, what's happening right now. And what I want to say is that the technology is working. Also in this big plant. It was already working in Kristinehamn. There we had 92% within specification. It's working in this big plant as well. Factory is producing. We're going to come back to those production numbers. Customers are buying, and they're committed to circularity. And we are currently ramping towards the 60,000 tons, which is our first goal. And then we're going to ramp onwards to 120,000 tons. This is what the plant looked like in February 2021. This is actually the PM5, paper machine 5, that was owned by SCA. This is September 2021. This is when we have demounted the whole paper machine 5. And as you can see here, you have the foundation of our dryer. But this is what we started working with. This is November 2022, approximately a year later. Inauguration. This is our plant, and you can see the dryer in the end of the picture here. This is last night. So 3 o'clock in the morning, this is what it looks like in the plant when we're operating the plant. This is how it looks like in our warehouse. We have our main warehouse of raw materials in Tunadal, which is about 2 kilometers in a harbor very near to the plant. But this is what it looks like in our warehouse. And this is what it looks like when we are delivering to customers. This is a plug-and-play solution. Customers are used to getting these type of bales of dissolving pulp. That's the common way of delivering dissolving pulp to fiber producers throughout the world. And they're getting the same type of material from us. The only difference is that we use 100% recycled textiles in our as a raw material. They use wood and wood chips. The fashion industry has sustainability issues. We know that we have talked about it on a global terms for a long time, but the fashion industry actually has emitting about 5 to 8% of the world's CO2s. That's more than the transportation and the flying industry in combination. Polyester is causing about 35% of all the microplastics in the world today, in all the oceans. Cotton uses enormous amounts of water, pesticide and fertilizers, and every year more than 200 million trees are being cleared in order to make textiles for the fashion industry. Less than 1%, unfortunately, is recycled into new textiles today. When we look at what's happening in the world, let me put this picture, which is kind of a big one on the global scale, but if we just put it one step up, there is not one political leader, maybe one or two. It's not one CEO in the world today who does not think that this is important. I mean, if you look at the global trend, it's all towards sustainability, circularity. Look at the flying shame, look at the electrical cars. We want to eat sustainably, but we also want to clothe ourselves sustainably. And here we are the first in the world to be able to offer that to our customers. We see increasing legislation throughout the world. USA is coming with the New York Fashion Act, and also California SB 707 is coming into stream pretty soon. Has not been legislated yet, but it's on the table. New York and California are the driving forces in the United States. In Europe, we have the EU Sustainability Textile Strategy. I will come back to that on the next slide. In China, it's also happening. In China, government aim to recycle 25% of all textiles by 2030. We also see that sustainable fashion is an emerging trend. Chinese are willing to pay 5 to 20% if they know the origin of what they are buying. Plus, that 74% of consumers choose traceable brands versus 56% on a global scale. Sometimes I think we're missing the force, what's happening in China. China is on the move towards sustainability as much, and in many cases more, than the rest of the world. Renewcell, we are aligning with the EU new legislation coming on stream. So here, this has already been decided, but by 2025 it's going to be implemented. We're going to see minimum recycled contents. We're going to see digital product passports, prohibition of greenwashing, but also ban destruction of unsold textiles. We see restricted export of textile waste. And we are in Europe, we're exporting our textile waste to Ghana and Kenya. In Americas, it's to Guatemala and El Salvador. We also see prevention of microplastics and so forth and so on. We are having a fantastic tailwind. And the fashion stakeholders, they are also seeing this, of course. They also see the trends in the world. And being a fashion brand, you want to keep up with the trends. Everybody would like to have more sustainable ways of clothing ourselves. And that's why we see secondhand coming up, which is also a threat then to the fashion brands themselves. They are looking left and right for sustainable options and circular options. That is what Renewcell can offer. H&M say they're going to have 100% recycled or other sustainably sourced materials by 2030. I will come back to other sustainably sourced. Inditex, 100% sustainable man-made cellulosic fiber. That is what we are producing by 2030. Carey is all about high-end fashion, of course, but high-end fashion is also sustainable fashion. But also 2030, EU wants to be the most sustainable region in the world. So we are in a very good position. We are swimming with the current, not across, and definitely not against. But, as I said, solutions are lacking. We know that cotton has an issue with fertilizers, pesticides, and water. We know that polyester have issues with CO2 emissions, chemicals, and microplastics. And viscose is, of course, about clearing forests. And there is an debate ongoing. We will not go into that. I don't know what legs to stand on, but there is a debate about what is a forest and what is a plantation. If we then go into the so-called sustainable materials, BCI and organic cotton, still using a lot of water, pesticide, and fertilizers, and it has also lately been questioned, is it really BCI? Is it really organic cotton? We're starting to see greenwashing problems coming up in that sector. Recycled polyesters does not exist today. Recycled polyesters is PET bottles being transformed into clothes. As soon as you've made clothes out of PET bottles, they can't be recycled today. PET bottles, on the other hand, can be recycled over and over. So you're destroying a recycling system, making clothes. Certified lyocell and those type. This is still deforestation. You still have all these problems that I mentioned earlier. And the problem will become bigger as we go forward. Today we have approximately 110 million tons of fibers produced in the world, grown to 142. We have revised that a little bit for those who remember. And that is the reason for the growth, is that we have more people coming in to middle class, but we also have a population growth in the world in general. Renewcell, what we do, we only use 100% textiles and making that circular. We're taking an otherwise linear value chain where we're pumping up oil, growing cotton, cutting down trees, running it through the value chain once, and then putting it on landfill or into incineration. And what we do is we create circularity in that value chain, and we can do this over and over again. What makes Renewcell unique from our perspective? We are using 100% recycled textiles or textiles as raw material, but it's also plug and play. And I want to stress that. When we're using Circulose materials for making fiber, yarns and fabrics, and then of course garments, designers know how the materials work. We're producing a viscose, modal, lyocell. That is the type of fabrics we are producing, or our customers are producing with our raw material. So that means that designers, product owners, they know what they get. They know how it washes, how it shrinks, how it colors in, colors out, and so forth. We are already at an industrial scale. We are not a pilot. I mean, we had a fairly big pilot actually in Kristinehamn. Today we are industrial. We have a branded product, and we have existing demand with our offtake agreements and also with other customers that we have not signed agreements with. From IPO to operational, if you see when we started off here in the IPO, we had offtake agreements with Sanyo. I mean, a lot of things have happened. We didn't even have contracts for the equipment. Made all the contracts. We have cleared the whole site, as you could see. We have then adapted the site and then installed all the equipment, made all the piping. And in Q4, we started up the plant. We had COT 1st of November 2022. Then we also, Toby joined us and Tricia joined us. And then we have done, in the fourth quarter last year, we made the process optimization, and then we were able to make the first deliveries. That is in, as Michael said, that is in record speed of actually coming from IPO when we only had money in the bank to actually having a plant that is working. In Q1, we have produced, and we are ramping up the production to approximately 25%. We have delivered 2,000 tons already. And we're now ramping towards the 60,000 tons, and then we'll continue ramping up to 120,000 tons. At the same time now, when everything is there, we also see there's enormous demand. Tricia will come back to that. We need to start looking, okay, how does the market look like? What should we do next? So the questions that we're asking ourselves, should we have 360,000 tons or 1 million tons? It all depends on how well we can actually expand this, but it's a question of multiplication. Now, so how is it going in production, month by month? December, we were producing 650. We had 46% within specification, and we sold the first tons, so 55 tons in December. Fast forwarding then to April, 94% within specification, 32% plant loading. Those are important numbers. 94% means to me that we have the process under control. it's not finished. We're still debottlenecking. So when I see a number like 94%, we're going to squeeze the system more in order to get to the 5,000 metric tons per month. And that number will probably come out a bit, become 80, 85 or so. And then you continue running, and then you tighten it up again, and then you crank it up again. That's the way you actually do this. We're working a lot with Six Sigma method, and that is the basis of Six Sigma. Control, increase. Control, increase. So how does customer like our products? Well, if you look at this, these are the main parameters. I will not go through them all, but if you look at the ones where we have plus, double plus, or triple plus, I will not go through those. But the ones, if you look at the synthetic content, we are already below the 2% that we're supposed to be in specifications. Customer likes our products. They are also trimming, but it takes some time because there are also some tricks that we need to show them how to operate. And Christina, whom you will meet a bit later on, she is fantastic at that. So we're moving on that, and we're also working on optimizing the trials on the viscosity. So we are optimizing that as well as we're doing with the fiber length distribution, which is a little bit too long today. So we are working on that. But main message on this slide is the quality is very good. And if you look at some of the metal content and so forth, it's much, much better than we actually have to be. Okay, status then on 60,000 tons. We on each of the process segments that we call it, and we call them loops. We have a dissolving loop, a bleaching loop, and then a stock prep and a dryer. So if you look at the dissolving loop, we have the shredders, that is from shredded to unbleached tower. We're producing 5 tons per hour, and in the bleaching, 10 tons per hour and more. We haven't run it more, but this is the maximum we have run so far, and bleaching 8 tons. If I take the bottom two, I feel very comfortable. Where we're working today is on the first part, on the dissolving. And there we are at 5 tons, but we are also pushing that system onwards all the time. And we're coming through every bottleneck as we go forward, so it looks quite positive. But what we also have in this plant is big buffer tanks, and that is between the different loops, and that's why we are able to run this plant very efficiently. Big buffer tanks, tip from the coach, is very good in process industry. Okay, so what about competition? Well, we have emerging innovations, new type, and we have the ones that are 30% recycled or 100% recycled. We also have the plug and play. We are actually, a new type of technology that is 100% recycled, but we plug and play. We can help the customers to move very fast towards circularity. So, main strategic step as we go forward, to ramp up Renewcell 1, eyes on the price, get these 60,000 tons produced, and then ramp it up to the 120,000 tons in the second half. Sales and branding. It's all about now continue developing our fiber partners, but also throughout the value chain, and brand our product together with our brand partners, Levi's, H&M, Inditex, PVH, Ganni, etc. And then multiply this. We have a plant up and running. This plant, it's a blueprint. And then we can actually increase the capacity, decrease the capacity. We can just multiply the plant as it looks like. And then get towards creation of as much market share as we would like to have. So, future of Renewcell. Use the Renewcell 1 as a blueprint. One site, multiple lines. Standardize equipment packages. So, let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's use the chemistry that we have, but in standard type of equipment. Geographic coverage, proximity to material, and then proximity to customers, but then also time versus capex. Those are the things that we are considering as we go forward and building our plants. And then, of course, we are tickling ourselves, what if? If we would have 1 million tons by 2030, that would be, 0.7% of the total market, but it would also be very small part of the 11 to 30 million ton market that we see today that is directed towards man-made cellulosics. With that, I'd like to hand over to Tricia Carey for the explanation of what's happening on the marketplace, which is a super interesting area. And thank you so much for joining us here, Tricia, and the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Patrik. Good to see everyone here today. So before I get started in telling you more about what we've been working on in the commercial team, I want to share with you some of the stories that our customers are saying about us. These are customers from around the world that we've been working with. And first we'll start with Triarchy. Triarchy is a denim brand, more premium in the market. And their founder and designer, Adam, will tell you a little bit more about what he's been working on and why he's been working with Circulose. The whole line around Triarchy is based on using more environmentally responsible materials, and you can hear more from Adam here.
My name is Adam Taubenfliegel. I am co-founder, creative director, and head of responsibility at Triarchy Denim, which is based in Los Angeles, California.
And so Adam has a whole strategy around how he develops the line, which he'll discuss.
So at Triarchy, when it comes to responsibility, and I use that word intentionally because we as a team get behind the word responsible more than we do words like sustainable. And the reason for that is that for the most part, we are still making new products with new fibers and new fabrics. And so when we do those things, we want to make sure we're doing so with the most responsible lens we can, until things like Circulose enter the experience, because then we can make new things from old things. But we pioneered plastic-free stretch. We use recycled metals. We've eliminated rivets. We use extremely low water washes. We don't use chemicals. The list goes on and on. It's a really strict lens. So a lot of the time in design, there's many things I can't do, but then it allows me to do better at the things we can do. And so the trade-off is a fair one, in my opinion.
And I think Adam says that so well, you know, making new things from old things, how we can take from textiles that are no longer being used in order to make new garments, which he'll talk about what he does with Circulose.
Working with Circulose, it really does allow us to come full circle because we can start making new from old. And I think when we looked at the possibility of making jeans from fibers, that a lot of which come from old jeans, there's really no other partner besides Circulose that you can bring that to reality with. And so for me, the future will be continuously increasing the percentage of that fiber so that we can get to a place where nothing is wasted.
Yes, continuing to increase the use of Circulose. It's a wonderful message. And here you can see some of the styles from Triarchy. These women's styles are retailing at Neiman Marcus, which is a specialty department store chain in the United States. I would say it's very similar to NK in Stockholm. And I think this is just one great example of where we will continue to build in the market with brands who are very rich in their storytelling. Now, as we go around the world, I'd like to introduce you to our next presenter, who's from H&M, and she is joining us from Dhaka. And this is Gagan Bansal, who is Head of Material Innovation and Strategy at H&M.
Hey everyone, my name is Gagan Bansal. I'm the Head of Material Innovation and Strategy, and I'm calling from Dhaka. Good to be here.
So Patrik had mentioned about the H&M strategy for sustainability and specifically around circularity, and Gagan will give us a little more details around this.
So H&M has been working on the vision that we have to get circular products, circular supply chain, and circular business models. And towards this goal, we have also set that we want to decouple our growth with the resource use. So circularity in whole is where we are wanting to work towards. We have set our goals for 2030, where we're talking about 100% sustainably or recycled materials. And by 2025, we have set 30% as recycled materials for our products. And today in 2023, we have already achieved 23%. So we believe that we are heading towards the goals that we have set by working with a lot of innovators, supply chain partners, industry stakeholders, and with our suppliers to make sure that what goals we are setting, we are able to reach those goals by scaling all the new innovative materials that we are having. So that's the work that the team in all product teams working very, very closely to get a great product out of the recycled materials our team is working on.
So H&M needs to reach the goal of 30%, and they see the importance of scaling, and that is key. Now, talking to Gagan a little more about why they use Circulose and how they are integrating this into the collections.
Good question, Tricia. Circulose has the same vision as us. I think we really connect in the same ideology, because when we talk about circularity, we are talking about using our own waste and converting that to a product. And Circulose does exactly the same. Convert the waste to a pulp and then being used in the materials. Circulose products today have been tried and tested with a lot of our placed orders in last couple of seasons. And we believe that with the blending of Circulose with viscose and with cotton, we have been able to reduce the virgin fiber consumption in our total production. And this is where I think the next generation fibers and innovations like Circulose can help us reach that goal, to use as less virgin as possible and recycle the materials that we have already bought and used.
Yes, so recycling materials, and that is key. H&M, now if you go on to H&M.com and you type in Circulose under the search feature, you will find 36 styles using Circulose. One is actually my dress too, which uses 20% Circulose. But you can see the range of styles, men's, women's, children's, that are using Circulose. One of my favorite is this style. Ivan, if you could just, yeah, great. This, the t-shirt, please. The t-shirts from Coase are great. These are using a blend of viscose, using 30% of viscose in these styles blended with cotton. They come in 6 different colors. And this, I think, is an amazing program because it's a basic style, and they call it Modern Classics within the collection. So wonderful that this program is also at Coase. This also H&M online right now. And you can even see children's wear that is using Circulose. So really all the work that has been done by the team over the past several years to bring these styles to the market. Now these collections all use Circulose that was pulp from the pilot line. So this is where we were building up that demand in the market, and these are available now. We talk about next generation fibers. Gagan mentioned this, and you'll hear it from our next speaker as well, who is Nicole Rycroft from Canopy. Nicole is the founder and executive director of Canopy. Canopy is an NGO that supports responsible forestry, and Nicole will explain more of this now. She's calling in from Canada.
Hi there, I'm Nicole Rycroft. I'm Canopy's founder and executive director, and I'm calling in from Vancouver, Canada.
So Nicole's going to explain more about what next-gen fibers are, because I think, this is slightly different, where you have to look at what's coming in and new innovations in materials, and that's what next-gen is. For Canopy, next-gen is not using wood pulp. So Nicole will explain.
So for Canopy, we're a solutions-driven, not-for-profit organization, and we're working to protect the world's forests, species, climate, and to help advance frontline community rights. And so we do this work by transforming unsustainable supply chains that currently drive deforestation and forest degradation. So the viscose supply chain being one of them. And next-gen solutions are the future of fashion. Next gen solutions, as everybody will likely know, are the lower carbon alternative, more circular raw materials, so using discarded textiles or agricultural residues or even food waste, rather than cutting down carbon-rich and biodiverse forests to make the textiles and the fabrics that the fashion industry depends on. Over the course of the next decade, Canopy will be working to bring 60 million tons of new next-gen product online to the market. That will bring significant environmental savings, 90 to 130% less greenhouse gas emissions, 90 to 100% less land use impacts, 5 times lower impact on biodiversity. But then there are also obviously the commercial and the financial benefits with that. For business leaders, as climate change increasingly impacts supply chains, and the legislative landscape is rapidly changing, brands and business leaders know that for them to have stable supply of low carbon materials 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and that underpin the success and the vibrancy of their businesses, that we need to be accelerating the transition to next-gen solutions. And Renewcell is the kind of the pioneer, the leader of that transition.
Excellent recognition. The pioneer, leading, scaling. This is so important because retailers and brands need those options. And Nicole will tell a little bit more of her thoughts around Circulose developing in the market and the 500 brands that Canopy is already working with.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main challenge for brands at this point is just being able to access, Circulose and low carbon next gen alternative materials at the scale that they need. And so, I mean, the fantastic thing for Renewcell is that you're first to market, and that there's this market advantage of being first to market. There's incredible market interest and need and demand for next-gen solutions. Canopy works with more than 500 fashion brands. They have all committed to ending their use of viscose that originates from high carbon, high biodiversity value forests, and to transition and prioritize the purchasing of lower carbon next-gen alternatives. It's now really that chicken and the egg situation, or part of the transition, where there's just not enough commercial material available. And so I think for brands, they're seeing this as critical for them to hit their Scope 3 emissions, their biodiversity targets, as well as to ensure that they've got a secure supply of low carbon feedstocks for their businesses into the future. And so, we need to have brands continuing to signal that this is the direction that they're wanting to head. As I mentioned, all of our Canopy style brand partners have written into their policies that they want to be prioritizing and accessing next-gen solutions like Circulose. We have more than 600,000 tons of explicit letters of intent to purchase as soon as next-gen product is available and online. We are seeing brands really start to step in and support these first-to-market next-gen products, Circulose being integrated into conventional viscose lines, that brands are really starting to pull those through into their collections and profiling that. And we're increasingly seeing brands start to engage their conventional viscose producers, urging them to not only buy and source Circulose, but to include it in meaningful quantities. So looking at including it in their inventories at, at least 50% of the fiber mix, rather than just a small sort of somewhat more tokenistic percentage. And then I think the other area, of course, is for policy makers to be encouraged. And brands obviously have an important role to play in keeping, not just in the EU, but in other jurisdictions as well, ensuring that that regulatory framework, be it zero interest loans or other kind of favorable conditions, help to incentivize and enable an accelerated transition to next-gen production.
So, as Nicole says, access to materials, Circulose, that are made into fibers that retailers and brands can add into their collections. And Nicole and her team are amazing support for us. If anyone was here for the inauguration, Nicole was actually here and hanging from the rafters with a banner to show her support. Next, we'll move on to Inditex in Spain, and Hermin will tell us more.
My name is Germán García Ibáñez. I'm working as a head of sustainable raw materials and circularity at Inditex, which is the parent company of Zara.
And so Inditex has used Circulose in their collections. This one right here is in this dress uses Circulose, but we'll hear more from Hermin on why.
It's a great material. We have tried with our designers and Zara and buyers, and it is no different. It's a great material that is at scale very soon. So fantastic. Yeah, and Circulose demonstrate that it's possible, that the circularity in this industry is possible.
No difference, great to use in materials and moving at scale. So this collection was a capsule that was done by Inditex, and we continue to work very closely with them. So those were some of the comments from our partners. Now I want to tell you more about what we've been working on in the commercial and a strategy and what you'll be seeing in the future. Overall, when we look at the textile industry, some common themes recur, and many of these you've already heard of from Patrik as well as from Nicole and others in their talks. First is the population and consumption growth. So population continues to grow, and with that, consumers need to they want access to more materials. Rising middle class means also more consumption. Right now, there's over 100 billion garments that are being produced, 20% of which are never even sold. So this is really a part of the problem. Policy is the second theme. You've heard that, Patrik mentioned that. Policy not just here in the EU, but also in the US and in Asia coming on strong. Sustainable fiber gap. Here I will go further into that. Patrik had mentioned some of the landscape around fibers and what's being used between cotton, man-made cellulosics, and synthetics. But this sustainable fiber gap, as Patrik showed you, where will that growth come from? Going from about 110 million tons to about 142 million tons, where will we have more fibers coming? Which ones will they be? We'll discuss that further. And then, of course, top of mind, and we hear this over and over across many industries, is around the carbon footprint and what will need to change there. And finally, greenwashing. This has been coming on stronger, especially in the past year, and not just in textiles, but also we see this in other industries where it's about having verified claims and really allowing the consumers to have some protection around what is being marketed. And we see that there will be regulation around greenwashing as well. Those are some of the key trends shaping the industry. And what we have going forward, where do we look at the addressable fiber market? So if we bring the fiber market down to three key areas, there's cotton, there's dissolving wood pulp, and there's oil. Those are the raw materials needed to make fibers. And the fibers are in the three categories of cotton, coming from plants, man-made cellulosic fibers, which we talk about a lot, MMCF, you might see that abbreviation. And then finally, there's synthetics. And within synthetics, it's primarily polyester, but it can also include nylon as well as spandex. So right now, that total market is about 110 million tons a year. If we look at the man-made cellulosic portion, this is 7 million tons a year. That's how much machinery exists to make man-made cellulosics, viscose, modal, lyocell, acetate. Where are we going forward with fibers? So the forecast to 2030, we have cotton. Cotton really can max out for cotton about 25 million tons, and that's based off of a lot of the challenges with land use. Land can also be used for other crops. You now have social issues that are rising within the cotton industry, and you do have some cotton that is being done in more sustainably way, like BCI cotton, and U.S. Cotton Trust Protocol. So there is some initiatives around cotton being more sustainable, but more or less it will stay about 25 million tons. And then you have, if you look at polyester, you do have recycled polyester, as Patrik had mentioned. Most of that's coming from bottles. But now if you look at the category of man-made cellulosics, either coming from dissolving wood pulp or from circulose as a raw material input. Here, the addressable market as man-made cellulosic fibers continues to grow will be around 11 million tons, but we also know that there's substitution that can happen within the market. So substitution of using fibers made with circulose substituting cotton. We already see this example has been demonstrated with the Levi's jean. Levi's, in this example, they actually replaced cotton with circulose. And here with Levi's, I'll talk about a little bit more, but I think it's important when you see what can be done using circulose as a replacement to cotton. Then when we look at synthetics replacement can be probably around 10%, 15% of the market. Here, developments that we work on with fiber producers using filaments. This is one way of replacing synthetics. So cotton market, maybe about 30% of that share, synthetics about 10, 15% of that share, as well as the direct addressable market. So potential market is about 30 million tons. So high demand, not a lack of interest around using circulose. Who are some of the direct customers that we work with now? Well, Canopy puts out a report every year where they rank all the fiber producers based on their raw material and their forestry aspects, which you see listed on the right, what Canopy has put together and where they rank the suppliers. These are the top 10 fiber producers by volume in the global man-made cellulosic fiber market. So we already are working with and have contracts with Lenzing, who's listed here, as well as Sanyu. So we have contracted and have long-term contracts with those two fiber producers. And we also have LOIs with Birla, who's based in India, and with Grace, as well as with Jilin. And we also have some others who are not listed in the top 10. So we are really already well versed in working with these customers globally, that they're already starting to use circulose. And these are the fiber producers that are already making circulose that are in the garments that you see here in the room today. Now, what is the value proposition of using circulose within apparel? Patrik had highlighted this, and I think it's worth sharing again, is that circulose comes from 100% recycled materials. So we are the only supplier to produce pulp that is using 100% recycled materials. And those materials can be recycled again. And we've shown that this can be done up to 7 times. So we're not looking at just what we have now, but long-term, what can be done in the market. And very important is that the quality is equal to virgin quality. So that if you're a yarn spinner who's using fiber, your quality, you can work that right into your system. Or if you're a fabric producer, or even as a consumer, you won't notice a difference at all in the quality of the products. So as we say, we are making fashion circular, but we're actually doing it now, which is quite different from what we see in the market, and as you heard from many of our partners. Now, how will we bring products to market, and how will we develop this? We've talked a lot about a push-pull that's happening, where we're working directly with the fiber producers, and we're working also with fashion brands. So the fashion brands are the channel captains who will pull through in the market. But now we also see, since we have scaled, we can start to fill up the market here with yarn spinners and fabric producers. So the accessibility will happen at a much faster rate. We also know that there's support here from NGOs and associations like we see with Canopy, as well as others like the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and Accelerating Circularity. So the whole industry is shifting, and we see a huge evolution happening. We also know that collectors and sorters are a part of our whole network, and we appreciate also the support of our investors that are here today and the financial market. So we look at this as encompassing the entire ecosystem around bringing a product to market. So who are some of the brands that we've worked with, and how do we communicate this? So some of the brands that we've worked with to this point have been H&M. I mentioned and highlighted some of their programs, and not just in H&M, but also in their portfolio brands, so Coast and Arket. Also with Inditex, Zara, as well as with PVH. Now PVH is the parent company for Tommy Hilfiger and Calvin Klein, and Levi's. So I mentioned a bit about this Levi's jean because I think, again, wonderful example where we replaced cotton, but not just in replacing cotton, but it was done at a value where actually Levi's that normally will retail around a equivalent of 120, we're able to retail this jean for about 140. So taking a classic 501 Levi's style, this is something that's been in wardrobes for years, and now replacing it with Circulose. So Levi's has been a great partner, and sorry, skipped ahead there. Levi's has been a great partner to work with on this, and we continue to do developments with Levi's. Then there's some other brands that are more sustainably oriented, Ghani, Pangaea, Triarchy that you heard from. So we've been bringing on more collections that have launches with Circulose, and there are plenty more to come that you'll be seeing in stores. So it's not just what the brands are doing, but then what is the communication that's happening? And we've had amazing global press coverage around Renewcell and Circulose. And this press coverage really comes from a truly organic story. Maybe some of you saw this New York Times article that ran in November. This was really interesting because the journalist came, she had interviews with us, and she says, I'm going to change the way my story I was going to write. And she actually wound up sending back a photographer. This ended up being a front page story on the New York Times style section, as well as an additional page inside. Now, the New York Times circulation is 3.8 million per day. So, this kind of coverage that we get, that is truly handled on a PR basis, we're not paying for any of this, really helps to highlight the story. As Forbes highlights here, it's one of the most critical environmental stories to have escaped the headlines. How important it is to tell this story around Renewcell, that we are educating the market and inspiring them. Some of the other areas is not just on press, but also different awards and where we've been on stage. Most recently, a couple weeks ago, we announced the World Changing Ideas Award that we were awarded from Fast Company. And also in March of 2023, Patrik was invited to be at the United Nations speaking on the World Water Day. So building the community, educating around Circulose. We also know that we are integrated into the strategies of our brand partners. As you heard from Inditex and H&M, but also what we have here from PVH, they launched the Shawn Mendes collection last month, and with this Shawn Mendes collection, it was all based on circular materials, and this collection was called Reborn Classics. Again, kind of that take on classics and very basic items. And here, this is a blend with cotton and a viscose made with Circulose. But as highlighted by the EVP of Sustainable Business and Innovation, it's about that vision and technology that's driving the industry forward. And this is the vision to live by. So we are integrated into the collections. And now if you go online to Calvin Klein, you'll find more than 15 styles using Circulose. So how will we work with retailers and brands? We will do this through co-branding. So co-branding is where we can use our story about having 100% recycled textiles, recyclable, and having equal quality, and we integrate that into the brand's stories. We can do this through different ways with hang tags. We can do it in-store, labels, a lot of information that can be done digitally. But overall, what we're doing is we're adding value. We're adding value to the retailers and brands. We're bringing them a truly authentic story, and we're making this happen very easily. So this is key to how we will work in co-branding in the future. What other ways will we look at our growth? Well, I've put it into 5 different categories here. The first is around product development. You heard Nicole Rykoff talk about where fiber producers will integrate 50% or more. On average now, fiber producers are integrating 30% of circulose into their fiber. So as we look, there'll be increase of using circulose because now there's access to more materials. So this will be one way of product development. There will also be more around traceability and transparency. Yesterday, we announced a collaboration with Textile Genesis, which is a blockchain provider. And there will also be more developments within the fiber aspect around performance. So these are some of the product development ways that we will continue to see for growth of circulose. We will also build out a circulose supplier network. And Patrik had touched on this a bit. And this will be where yarn spinners and fabric developers will come up with more qualities using circulose, and this will be easy access for retailers and brands then. So the circulose supplier network, which will be launching in July and August, will really help the market to speed it up. And then also we have expansion into different market segments. You see here today, there's a lot of denim product, you see knits. Well, we need to also expand into the activewear market. And we can also grow in home. Amazing some developments that we've already started to work on in the home market. And eventually we could even be into non-wovens as well. We will continue to build on our brand equity. So this is where it's recognized and understood what circulose stands for. And this, as we've had the amazing press globally, we work with more global brands, this will help to develop further. And overall, we will have a global growth. Most of the brands that we've been working with so far have been based in Europe, but we will expand to opportunities in the United States, Canada, South America, as well as domestic markets, which are developing in India and China. So this gives an overview, and this is how we make fashion circular together now. I look forward to your questions, and I think we're going to head into a break now, Toby. Yep, 15-minute break, which means we will be back at 2:15 sharp. So thank you for your time. Enjoy the coffee and refreshments outside.
Fashion consumption keeps on growing, driven by the expansion of the global middle class. People buy more and more clothes, use them less, and discard them faster. Most discarded clothes go straight into landfills or incinerators. That is what happens to about 4 out of every 5 garments in the European Union, which is equal to 8.5 million tons per year. The rest are collected and sorted separately. High-quality pieces are picked out and sold again in secondhand shops locally or to export markets for another cycle of use. Low-quality pieces, which make up most of what is collected, may be downcycled into rags or insulation or stuffing for car seats. But in the end, almost all textiles end up in landfills or incinerators. Less than 1% of clothes are recycled back into clothes. That's more than 90 million tons of textile fibers every year, just lost in a linear take, make, and dispose model of production. Renewcell changes that. We make fashion circular. We divert textile waste and put it back into the fashion value chain as a drop-in replacement for virgin textile materials like man-made cellulosic fibers, cotton, and polyester. It works like this. We take in pre-sorted textile waste that is high in cotton content. We shred it and remove buttons and trims. The shredded cotton is then turned into a slurry. Dyes, polyester, and other contaminants are separated out. The slurry is finely dried and formed into square sheets of Circulose-branded dissolving pulp. We sell bales of these 100% recycled sheets of Circulose pulp to our customers in Asia and Europe. They dissolve the pulp into a liquid, either on its own or in a blend with wood pulp, to make virgin-quality man-made cellulosic fibers. These fibers are then spun into a yarn, either on their own or in a blend with cotton or other fibers, depending on preference. The yarn is knitted or woven into fabric, unblended, or blended with other yarns. The fabric is cut and sewn into a garment that looks, feels, and behaves just like a regular piece of clothing. A fashion brand distributes the garment, featuring a Circulose brand label to a consumer. Right back into the wardrobe again. Loop closed.
Yeah, welcome back. And I hope you enjoyed that video showing a little bit about the value chain that we are working with and that we help to make a circular value chain. And if you want to touch and feel a little bit the parts in that value chain, we also, for those here in the room, we have some things you can have a look at for fibers and raw materials and how it looks like and what it feels like. So do come and have a look at that. And I'll just click on here and show you a little bit about the price development of some of the components in that value chain and how they developed over time. And here, just starting at the bottom, here you see a line for hardwood dissolving pulp. That's the product that Circulose is most like, a dissolving pulp. Today, a lot of dissolving pulp comes from hardwood. That's the largest volume category of dissolving pulp. And as you can see, it varies over time. It's quite a volatile price curve. And then above that, you see a curve for viscose, which is what's made from dissolving pulp. So the viscose also volatile over time, goes up and down, and we show a curve also for cotton, which is the fiber that's most like viscose, and where you also see some substitution between viscose and cotton. And to some extent, cotton and viscose follow each other, but not exactly. And you can also note here, I think, interesting to note, the gap between what you see as viscose on this graph and the hardwood dissolving pulp is what we call the conversion cost. So the cost for converting hardwood dissolving pulp, in this case, into viscose. So you can see that also varies over time depending upon the cycle. And somewhere on average, maybe around $1,000 per ton is the cost of converting that into viscose. And then on the right-hand side, you see a little red tiny line, but that's because we haven't been selling Circulose so long, but now we are, and you can see we have a pricing where we have a premium to hardwood dissolving pulp. And that's very important that we sell at a premium to normal dissolving pulp, but we also sell at a stable price level. And that's part of our strategy here, that we both get a premium, but we believe in stability in our pricing and that stability helps our customers and the whole value chain also understand where their pricing is and allows them to invest behind Circulose, because that volatility in pricing is not good for anybody if they need to understand their margins and invest behind growing Circulose. So that's where we position Circulose in terms of pricing. Having said that about stability, we do also have some indexation clauses. So for some of the more volatile input costs, and I'm talking particularly energy, some logistics cost, we have indexation. But otherwise, we have a pretty stable pricing position, and that we expect to see going forward as well. And then finally, I mentioned this, but you have a conversion cost from dissolving wood pulp, DWP, into viscose. If I then just show a little bit about then how our pricing compares to some of the other products out there. On the far right-hand side here, actually, if I start there in dark blue, you see the viscose that I mentioned on the previous slide. So that's the typical price right now for viscose, which is the lowest of these bars. But then a little bit lighter blue to the left of viscose, you have some of the sustainable alternatives that brands have. None of them are 100% recycled like Circulose is, so none of them have the same sustainable footprint or lack of footprint that Circulose has, but they all have a better sustainability profile than other fibers. And here you see BCI. Tricia mentioned BCI, Better Cotton Initiative. This is quite low price at the moment because also, as Tricia mentioned, it had some credibility issues. Right now, people don't see the sustainability profile as strong as claimed, quite straightforwardly. And then you have some others, Organic Cotton, Lyocell, and Modal. So these are the sustainable alternatives. And then on the left-hand side, you see basically the price of a fiber made from Circulose. The light green part here is the pricing, typical average pricing for Circulose, which you saw on the previous slide. And then we have around $1,000 per ton is what it takes to convert that into a fiber. So then it's comparable with the other sustainable fibers. And you can see basically this fits our pricing strategy to be at the lower end, the lower quartile of available sustainable fibers. So we are priced very competitive relative to alternatives, and we also offer a kind of circularity that no one else can offer as well. And if I then try and flick on and just try and put that into context, and bear with me, I'll explain what this slide is showing. Starting on the left-hand side this time. So here on the left-hand side, you see a bale of Circulose. That's what it looks like, a pile of sheets of Circulose. And the green bar next to that bale of Circulose is basically what you pay for that bale of Circulose. So it costs, as you saw on the previous slide, around $1,500 roughly in terms of dollars per ton, or $1.50 per kilogram. The dark green is just represents what it would cost if you were buying regular dissolving wood pulp. So we have a premium to regular dissolving wood pulp, as I mentioned before, and that premium is represented by the light green that you can see here. If you then transfer to the right-hand side, and here we think about what it would cost to buy a pretty regular pair of jeans. So here, a pair of jeans that retail at $50 US. So I would say in Sweden, quite a cheap pair of jeans today, but a regular, low-priced or good budget type of jeans retailing at $50 US. And if you look at the cost of the fiber and the cost of the Circulose in that pair of jeans, that's the tiny little green bar you can see at the bottom on the right-hand side. You can probably hardly see it, but it's the tiny little green part at the bottom on the right-hand side is the cost of that Circulose in the jeans. And so that's about $0.75 of the cost of those jeans. And the actual premium is even less than that. The premium that's the cost of the whole Circulose. But if you say the premium is around this light green part, that's around 25 cents in the jeans. So it's a very small premium in the context of the whole cost and pricing on the jeans. And then I think when you look further on the right-hand side up the chain, you see what it costs to then convert that first dissolving pulp into fiber. and then convert it further into yarn, convert it further into fabric, then into a garment. Then there's a big chunk which is OPEX, which is all the branding costs, the retailing costs, and then you get a margin on top in the retailer. And I think what this demonstrates is, particularly when you link back to what Tricia mentioned earlier about the Levi's jeans that you showed, when the retailer sees an opportunity to make a premium from having a truly circular garment, the premium they can make, Tricia mentioned $120 equivalent to $140 equivalent, so yeah, nearly 20% premium. That's enormous compared to the premium we talk about, but the point is that gives an opportunity for everyone in this chain, the retailer, but also others in this chain, to earn money out of this transition. And I think that's important also for the development of Circulose, that it allows everyone to invest in the value chain, to grow Circulose and grow the share of Circulose in the market, because it needs everyone to join the change. Okay. Now I'll just go over a bit to some numbers, and just a reminder here, we have changed to IFRS accounting from this year. So just that's been quite an important change in the way we account for Renewcell. Not a huge change in the numbers, but an important change because it means we are now fully comparable to other companies, and most listed companies and international companies account in Europe, at least according to IFRS. So it makes us fully comparable to other companies. So we think that's a good step. Like I said, it's not an enormous change. It does have some impact on the numbers, and the biggest impact is for leasing, which is accounted for in a different way, and that has an impact on EBITDA because we don't have the leasing cost in our EBITDA. And then there's a smaller change, which is the capitalized interest, but you don't need to follow that, but just by way of information. And then a bit of background on how we expect our financial profile to look when we ramp up Renewcell. I think to understand the development as we ramp up Renewcell here. And here you see a waterfall diagram from starting on the left is our net sales, and we expect variable costs to be around 50%. So that means we have a gross profit margin of 50% here on the third bar. And then when we ramp up to 60,000 tons, we expect then the fixed costs to come out, which is about 30 to 35%, giving us an EBITDA margin of 15 to 20%. So that's where we expect we would end up at 60,000 tons, but of course that's only a stepping stone before we go up to 120,000 tons, and it's once we ramp up to 120,000 tons that we expect to have the higher margin of 30%. And that's the bar I call fixed cost coverage here, which may be a bit confusing, but it just means that we don't grow our fixed costs very much, but we grow our sales much more. So that means the fixed costs as a percentage of sales go down. So it's when we get to 120,000 tons that we then expect to have the 30% EBITDA margin that we've always talked about. And just a bit of background then in what the main components of our costs are. On the left-hand side, you see the variable costs from the previous graph. Here you can see the main components are the raw materials, the logistics for getting the raw materials to site. We have energy cost, we have chemical costs, and a little bit of other costs. But it's primarily those four cost grouping, and the other cost is a little bit water and other things. And then when it comes to fixed costs, we're dominated by the personnel costs, the people working for Renewcell and running the business and operating the site. And that's the largest cost. We have some maintenance costs, and here we have some other as well, which is all the other costs of running the business. If I just flick on, and then a bit of background on how much we've invested so far. We have made a big investment, of course, in Renewcell 1, and we have invested 1.282 billion SEK up to the end of March. So that's the investment up to the end of March. We expect the investment for the 60,000 ton line to be 1.3 billion. So we're largely there. There's not much investment we expect to come for 60,000 tons. It's basically there. And then to grow to 120,000 tons, we expect another 150 million of investment cost once we initiate that step, which we've not done yet, but once we initiate that step. And then the total cost for the whole of Renewcell 1 for 120,000 tons is expected to be 1.45 billion SEK. And just to note, this excludes the leasing capex, which comes from the building. But all right, then I'll just move to and just flick and look a little bit going forward. We've talked about the tremendous opportunity that we have in Renewcell, and we're very conscious of the very strong demand and addressable available market for us. But financing our growth, I think, as you're all aware, is a difficult balancing act, and a balancing act we work with. What's crucial for Renewcell in being able to deliver on our growth is having our credibility. So on the left-hand side, we are fully focused on delivering Renewcell 1, and it's very important that we have full focus and priority on delivering on Renewcell 1, and what I call the proof points of Renewcell 1. And here, in particular, we're talking about delivering the volume that we say we can deliver and produce. So the 60,000 tons and 120,000 tons, proving we can deliver that volume, proving that customers are buying our product and liking our product and using our product, which they are today, but need to continue and grow. Proving that we can get the price point we talked about and that we believe in, which we are today, but we need to prove that, and proving that we can get the profitability out of the business at the price point that we talk about. So I think all those are very critical proof points that are also important credibility for the company in financing the future of Renewcell. So we need to deliver that, and you could ask why do we need to focus on delivering that first? But to have the feasibility for financing growth in Renewcell, and also to secure the best possible financing costs for the growth of Renewcell, it's very important that we get there. So on the one hand, it is very important that we have full focus there, and we do have full focus there. But on the other hand, we are very conscious that there's an opportunity in growing Renewcell, and that opportunity depends somewhat on how fast we can realize this market potential that's there. We are the first with the technology we have. We don't see competitors out there who are at the pilot plant stage yet, so we think we have around 5 years ahead of competitors. And that's at least because we haven't seen competitors yet establish pilot plants. But we need to capitalize on the fact that we're first. There's an opportunity to capitalize. And of course, as you grow, you get economies of scale as well as you grow the business. So there's an opportunity and to capture that revenue growth, to capture that profit growth, and also, of course, to make an impact in terms of the circular model that we are bringing to the fashion industry. So it's a constant balance. We are having to focus on the short term, but I think we need to start thinking also about how we finance the long term, and we are starting to think about opportunities and ways that it would be most effective to finance and to grow in the long term, but at the same time very much keeping our focus on delivering the credibility of Renewcell 1. So okay. And this, I think, having said that, and that we are striking this difficult balance every day, I think it's worth us keeping in mind what could Renewcell look like when we grow Renewcell with this opportunity we have ahead of us. And on the left-hand side here, you see Renewcell 1. Here we have 120,000 tons. When we're fully ramped up, we expect that to be a total investment cost of 2 billion SEK, which includes the capex I just mentioned. But when you add on to the capex, the startup curve losses and the working capital we need to invest, we expect it to cost about 2 billion. And then we will have an estimated annual EBITDA of around 500 million, which is this 30% EBITDA margin we talked about. So that's what Renewcell 1 looks like when fully ramped up. The next step that we've talked about that we see in terms of sizing looks most likely as a step of around 250,000 tons. And that's because we think it makes most sense when expanding to look for basically a new drying machine is really the defining factor in the next step. And a drying machine is most effective from a capex per ton point of view, but also from a operating cost point of view when it's larger than when it's larger than the one we have today. The one we have today is a second-hand drying machine, but if we buy a new drying machine, they're around 250,000 tons. And with that kind of size of plant, we would expect a total investment cost of around 3 billion for that kind of size, which is around double. If I talked before about the 1.45 billion for Renewcell 1, so it's around double of Renewcell 1 with around double of the capacity. So it's more or less a doubling of capex for a doubling of capacity, which also makes sense. We expect some inflation over time. We expect a new drying machine to be a little bit more expensive per ton than a second hand, but on the other hand, having a double scale, you get quite some scale benefits as well, which offset those factors. So that's the kind of investment cost we would expect. But then from that investment cost, you get, with a 30% EBITDA margin that we expect, an EBITDA run rate, an annual EBITDA of 1 billion SEK, which, if you do the math, comes out with a pretty decent return and a good payback. So that's the kind of, if you like, next step, how it could look like. And then if you look a bit further away and say, okay, Renewcell at 1 million tons, which, as Patrik mentioned in the beginning, if we can visualize what Renewcell would look like, if we can build Renewcell to 1 million tons, which is still not a huge market share of even the viscose market, but will take some building. But if we talk about 1 million tons, then we talk about a total investment cost of around 12 billion SEK, but then you're delivering an annual EBITDA of 4 billion SEK. So that's the kind of company Renewcell could be if we manage to capture this opportunity. So just to set the scene a little bit for what that opportunity is. So it's important we don't neglect this opportunity. All right, and then I will just have a slide here just to show you also a little bit changing topic, but on our sustainability work. We are very committed to sustainability. It's part of our DNA in Renewcell, so it's very important to us. We have reported in the annual report for 2022, which has recently come out, how we've worked with sustainability and how we measure ourselves and report in sustainability. So we've taken a step forward there. But at the same time, we recognize we're a small company. Sustainability and the work in this area is it's a very big area, and we've got a lot of work to do. So we're on a journey here as well. Where we've worked is we've worked with our stakeholders and mapped our impact in terms of sustainability, and particularly working through the Sustainable Development Goals here, where we've mapped our impact on our identified our stakeholders and mapped our impact on those stakeholders. And here you can see the 6 different Sustainable Development Goals that we believe are most relevant to us. And then we've set KPIs. We're measuring our performance against those KPIs and reporting on those. And we measure in particular against the GRI standard in our annual report. So you can follow that. So that's how we work. And then our roadmap going forward as well here is for 2023 and beyond, is to deepen our dialogue with those stakeholders, to particularly define our targets more clearly in terms of KPI targets, and to work on updating our LCA, which is an important component to life cycle analysis, once we are fully ramped up, because that's when you can really understand our LCA profile, footprint. And then finally also defining our targets in relation to the net zero plan. We have in line with the Paris Climate Act, we will have a net zero plan. So so that's part of the work we have ahead of us in terms of sustainability. Yes, okay, so with that, I will hand back to you, Patrik, for summary.
Thank you. Yeah, so basically, you see there's enormous market out there, and we have going to ramp this responsibly and so forth. So let me just say a few words on that, on the summary. I mean, short term, the 60,000 ton plant is built and operational, as we talked about in the beginning. Customers are buying, and they're also committed to circularity and sustainability. The current focus right now for the majority of the company, I would say 99% of the company, is to get the job done, to get this plant up to the 60,000 metric tons, and then we will also expand to the 120,000 tons during 2024. So that's the short term, what you can see from the company. Long term, we are working with, we have brands and legislators that are committed to change. You saw that from my slides and so forth. It's really brewing out there. It's happening, and more brands are coming in. But legislation is also coming in, especially from Europe, which is the driver in the world, but also in the US, from New York and from California is driving the American market and Asia. So the whole planet is actually moving towards these targets. So we are in a good position there. We will use Renewcell 1 as a blueprint. We also talked about that the equipment is standard type of equipment, and we can ramp this up. Let's say the secret sauce is within the chemistry. It's very difficult to copy what we do. We also have 7 patents already granted, and we have another 3 filed. But I'm also dedicating a team, and you will meet them in a minute, for the long term. And we will do it equity light. What I will say with that is we are understanding that we need to capture this opportunity, but we also need to do it in a responsible way to avoid that our shareholders get unnecessarily diluted. I mean, we really see the opportunity, and that's what Toby was talking about the balancing act. And what we also heard from Tricia, you could see that the market is there, the customers are there, the branding is there, and we are moving forward with light speed, I would say. It goes very fast when we meet with customers. We're also getting recognition in the world for what we're doing. I see that we get more recognition globally. I mean, being on the front page of the Times, that's a big thing. Having CNN coming here with a fully dedicated TV team doing a full full episode around circularity, and the majority of that was with Renewcell and Circulose. These are big things. So with that, I also like to talk a little bit about the team. We have a really, really good team. What I will present here is basically the management team, but we also need to recognize the women and the men out there working in the plant. These people, they know how this type of operation works. It's hard to find somewhere else than in Sweden. We also have it, in some areas in North America and in Asia and so forth. But having very good people, dedicated people who understand when we're talking about the disperger, what is that? People in our plant, they know that. You need to change the segments. No problem. It's always no problem. They are really, really good and fantastically dedicated. The additional people I would like to present here, apart from Tricia and Toby, whom you already met, is Christina L. Christofferson. She is our CTO. She has a PhD in pulp and paper, and especially in dissolving pulp, and she's been working for 15 years with dissolving pulp. What she doesn't know within dissolving pulp is not worth knowing, I would say. We also have Henrik Dahlbom. He's our project director, and he is one of the persons that will be spearheading towards the future of the next steps of Renewcell. Henrik comes from SCA and has been working in pulp and paper plants and all his life, actually. But also, he is from Sundsvall, and he was on the other side of the negotiation table when we negotiated. And in the end of the negotiation with SCA, he said, okay, we have an agreement, but there's one thing left I want from you. What's that? I want Henrik. Because we needed somebody who knows the ins and out of the Ortviken site, and Henrik knows that from like his right hand pocket. And then we have Martin Stenfors. Martin has been with us since 2016, is it? 17. And Martin is our COO, Chief Operation Officer, and he has been helping me with all the negotiations. He has also set up the whole supply network when it comes to raw materials, and he is now going to take the role as strategic director for building for the future. So Martin and Henrik will be the spearheads for the next things. The rest of the company will focus on delivering the 60,000 metric ton capacity. With that, I would like to go into the section of questions and answers. Maybe we can start with that and bring the whole team to the stage. And I will try to direct the questions as well as I can. Maybe you can hold this one and then we can move it on. So, do we have any questions from the auditorium? Now you have your chance to really put us on the spot. Otherwise, I think we have... we got one. Sad, please.
Hi, Sad Kardec from Pareto Securities. How do you see the development for the waste material that you are buying in terms of the cotton waste, the price development for that going forward?
Yeah. Maybe that is a question for Martin.
Good question. And what we see right now with some of the slides that was shown earlier is that with the legislation coming up, there will be a lot more material available. There will be legislation around separate collection and prohibition to incinerate textile waste being collected. So locally in Europe, the available post-consumer waste will increase a lot. Also, when it comes to industrial waste, with a sort of general increase in production, it will generate more waste, obviously, in the production processes. So, from our point of view, there will be a much higher potential supply of textile waste, mainly locally. And how that will affect pricing is obviously difficult to sort of to forecast or to have an opinion about, but what we do know is that the supply will increase locally a lot in the coming years.
Thank you. Other questions? Yes, please.
Hi, Axel Persson from Nordea. So thinking about the plans beyond the 120k ton plant here, and you touched upon it a bit in your presentation as well, but what would be the main rationale for those? And in that, I mean, will it be location-wise, China, Europe, North America, or will it be more determinant of finding the right brownfield conversion?
I would believe combination of those, actually. I mean, if you look at, when we're looking at sites, there's a lot of different parameters. One is, of course, the financial side. What is the cost of energy? What is the cost of water? What is the cost of, let's say, a site? But also people. But then on the other side, it's also about, we want green energy. We want to have sustainably produced steam and so forth. And we also then, of course, have legislations such as, let's say, taxes and all those kind of things. So it's very difficult to say exactly, but if you look at the sites that we're currently looking at, I mean, we have already communicated that we have first refusal on the PM4, which is just the next door to the plant where we have today. That is a fantastic site to put it here in Europe. On the other hand, long term, we will have sites in Americas. We will have one site also in Far East, is what we foresee. And it could be that we have such a good opportunities of placing the sites somewhere else that we might take that step, or already for the next one, and come back to investing further on to the European side. So it's difficult to give one answer to your question, but we will be looking at this holistically together with Martin and Henrik.
And another question here, but more on production in the short term here. So, I mean, you've had a bit of a of some issues regarding viscosity to get it up to the quality that you want, and of course also on friction in the shredders, some dust generations. So I was thinking here on what work has been done or will be conducted here for the 120k ton expansion, so that expansion ramps up smoothly.
Well, it's the 60,000 ton. We're also learning as we go forward. And one of the things that we need to do is, of course, to expand when it comes to shredding. We need more shredders for the 120,000 tons. But I would say 90% of the plant is already built for 120,000 tons. So maybe, Henrik, you can also explain this a little bit more from your side.
Yeah, is it your song? Okay. Yeah, so that's correct. I mean, we showed there earlier, we had 3 process loops. And I would say that the bleaching and the drying line, that's actually the main equipment there are for this 120k tons. So that's we need to focus on is the dissolving line and invest there. So that's the main focus.
Great, and maybe a final one from me here then. So in addition to maybe these small production issues, we are of course currently experiencing substantial cost inflation and a special macroeconomic environment. So I was thinking here, if Renewcell 1 was to be built today with all the parameters that we are seeing today, could you reach a similar profitability level? Will the return on capital be pretty much the same? In other words, would you be able to get a higher price on Circulose, which I guess you might be able to do, and cover those additional costs?
I should take that.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say look back the last couple of years. So we have had inflation, particularly well, during the pandemic. There was a big spike in commodities, and we had difficulties from the investment during the pandemic, which all contributed. But we've seen also then a price increase versus what we had in the IPO was 1,200. Now we see, as I said, around the 1,500 level. So we've had an inflationary impact in the prices, offsetting some of that, and I think there's nothing. Yeah, we believe that will continue. So if there, I mean, inflation seems to come down quite a bit in terms of our input costs. I would say that first. We absolutely don't see the same development going forward. We actually see significant reductions in energy cost going forward, and a bit in chemical cost as well. So I think the inflationary wave, at least on those two, in the foreseeable future, has come back down. But you know, we want to have the potential in our pricing to offset inflation. And if you look over the long term at the pricing of other fibers, they also they have inflation. So we're in a competitive market, and we wouldn't expect our position to change in that competitive market. But inflation is a fact that everyone has to deal with.
One more factor that actually hit us was the transportation cost, inbound logistics. That went, you know, enormous, and that's one of the factors why we see such a high inflation on the overall markets today, was the cost of transportation. That was about 7, 8, 10 times, and Martin can talk more about that. But what is the situation there on the inflation on logistics?
Yeah, so I mean, we had the extreme spike last year and end of 21. But I mean, now in the trade lanes that we are using for sourcing raw material, we're back to normal, and in some cases even lower than we were sort of when we entered the sort of high cost for the container freight. So that is not an issue going forward right now, at least. Yeah.
Thanks.
Take online.
Yes. Yeah, take one here. Yeah. So Sofia here from Carnegie. So I have a question about about brands, and what are your main criteria for choosing a brand, and also if could you have actually a brand that don't want to collaborate with you if you are collaborating with another competitor to them, and if you can give some details on the dynamics.
Yeah, Tricia.
Sure, I'll take that. So as far as competing brands, we don't do any exclusivity with any brands, so we're open in the market. We really look to see that brands have circularity strategies and working long term. So we don't want to be just one flash of doing one small capsule collection of 20 garments. That's not what it's about. Where we really want to have more of a longer term roadmap where we can work together Another criteria for working with a brand is that they will do the co-branding with us. So they will participate in telling the story around Circulose, where it's mixed in with their own brand ethos, and then we are a part of that. We're looking more geographically where we can expand, as I mentioned in our commercial growth strategy. So future, where can we be, addressing more brands in the US, reaching out even into other market segments, looking at activewear brands, looking at more intimate apparel brands that we could work with too. So really I see it's a balance between some of the large mass brands, like we've already worked with Inditex and H&M, PVH. So those global mass brands making up about 80% of our business, and the other 20 being some of the smaller, more sustainability story-driven brands, like Gani, Pangaea, where we've already worked with, but expanding more on that. We also have a web page, it's Circulose, that you can look to find all the new brand launches that come out, because they come regularly coming into the market. So you'll continue to see more with Circulose.
Thanks. I think we're going to take a few questions from the web or from the people seeing the stream here. So could we have some questions over there, Michelle? And please come up with your other questions and we'll try to answer them afterwards. So we'll come back.
Okay, so we have 3 people asking a very similar question. So this is a popular one. But the question is, have you given any thought to licensing the technology for selected partners for a faster capture of the market?
Actually, licensing is not what we are contemplating at the moment. The reason is that when you're licensing a technology, your technology gets spread all over the place. You don't really know where it's going to end up in the end. Renewcell is a technology-driven company. We have, apart from all the patents that we have, we also have a lot of knowledge in the processing. And showing everybody how to do that processing is not that we're going to do. However, if we would find somebody that we trust, we could potentially, imagine to have some kind of a joint venture or kind of co-location or something like that. But it's all about trust in this stage. We are fully aware of how knowledge heavy we are. Nobody has been doing this before. We are 5 to 7 years ahead of competition, and we will try to use that as much as we can. But it's all about trust, and I have been on the other side of the table working for large corporations like General Electric, and we have to be. We're not going to be taken to the cleaners, if that's what I'm trying to say here.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, what is the customer feedback on your product? Have they used it yet?
Yes, maybe Christina, you can take that.
Yeah, I can take that. The customer feedback is positive. We get the feedback that the Circulose pulp has very high content of cellulose, obviously, and besides that, the cellulose in itself also has a very good molecular profile, so it is the right sort of, or the right length of polymers that the customer wants to make strong and nice fibers. What is also a strength, and that the customer benefits from by going from a wood pulp to Circulose, is that they don't have hemocellulose and lignin contamination. I usually say this, that if I have been working with dissolving pulp in man-made cellulosic for many, many years, and been working with this, introducing a new pulp to a viscose producer or a lyocell producer. And I would think that if the viscose production today were run on cotton textile waste pulp, and you came with a wood pulp, then they would say that is not something we want to run, because the hemocellulose and other residues that you have coming from the wood is actually quite nasty for them, but they have adapted, they have learned how to run it. Now when we come with Circulose, we don't have that sort of residues. We also see from Patrik's slide earlier that the metal ion content, like iron and silica, that comes from sand and other impurities, is very, very low. Low also if you compare with many of the commercial available wood dissolving pulp out there on the market. So here we have a really good USP for Circulose. Although, of course, there are some drawbacks, which we have a good dialogue with the customers about. They have a new sort of impurity to deal with, synthetic fiber. You don't have synthetic fiber in trees, in wood pulp, but you have synthetic fiber in all textile, even if they are made of cellulose. There are also some contamination. So that is something that we have a very tight dialogue. There are possibility to filter it away, and if the viscose producer have a good capacity in filtering, they don't need to do anything. They just need to handle it in the usual way. In some cases, they need to do some capacity increasement in that process stage, and here we support and have a dialogue. We also see that the other very positive thing with Circulose, and also I think this is something that shows that we are working in the right way. The pulp we produce now in Renewcell 1 has very good reactivity, so the way the producer can use it works well. And in the demo plant, that was actually a problem. The pulp there was not as good as a commercial wood pulp. Now with the Ortviken pulp, we have sorted that out. And I think that is a good checkpoint on that. The work that was done during the demo time was very, very important, because we could take the learning for the construction of the mill, and now we have an excellent reactivity, and that is also what our customer give us feedback. So that's really good. Thank you.
Thanks, Christina. Yeah, we have one question from the auditorium.
Thank you. This is Nicholas Wallström, P&L Securities. And just a question about the margin. You guys have guided long term for potentially reaching above a 30% EBITDA margin. Do you foresee any potential economies of scale moving forward as you go into 250,000 or any further capacity expansions? Thank you.
I mean, as we get, I think over the long term, you get better on your margins as well. We expect to get better and better in terms of gross margin through yield improvements and working with our process and raw materials, and also when it comes to fixed costs. So I think the longer you operate, the better you get. Then when we look at a 30% margin, we're also conscious we're in a competitive market. But when we look at our cost profile and pricing profile, we believe we can get there. That's actually how we determine where we set our sort of pricing level today, basically backwards from what we want in terms of margin. But we also look at averages across pulp industry, where we see 30% is a pretty normal average today in terms of pulp margins, and we don't see why with a new process and with the uniqueness of Circulose, we should at least be able to achieve that. So I think that's the background to our thinking when it comes to that.
Thank you. Do we have another question from
Yes.
the people joining us via online?
We do. This one's about Circulose as a content and touch and feel. So also about, Tricia, your dress. How come it only has 20%? And also, does it feel any different to a regular cotton?
Yeah.
Tricia.
So how Circulose feels, and you can see around the room and touch and feel, and these are blends. You can also touch and feel the fiber, so that's viscose fiber made with Circulose. That's blended at 30%. The reason why there isn't more is really because there wasn't that much more. Everything, as I mentioned, that you see in the pictures and on the rack have all been made through our pilot line, where we were limited on quantities, and we were trying to get it out to as many players in the market because there was so much demand. So now that we have everything running at full scale, and you can see that for yourself since we have the industrial production running, now we can start to build out more and increase those percentages. And we see already we have one fiber producer, Sanyu, who we had on the screen ranked in the top 10, They are actually scaling up to 50% blend of Circulose in their viscose fiber production by the end of this year. That's their goal. And they've already publicly stated that by the end of next year, by the end of 2024, to be at 100% of Circulose in their viscose fiber. So with more, we can get more out there, and we can increase those percentages.
We can also add there that brands are looking for more than 50%. So they are also pushing towards more blending. But as Tricia said, you know, the pilot or the demo line only had so much capacity. Any other questions? Okay, do we have any other questions, online questions, or?
Yes, we have a few. They were all quite similar, so I'm trying to wrap them up.
Okay.
I guess about the factory was a few questions as well, about the timing, how long it will take to ramp up.
Yeah, Henrik.
Well, the ramp up is not going as fast as we are expected and want to, but we can see that from every month we are improving. So we know that this is a new process, and Michael said it's rather advanced. So we have been working really hard here to find operating window to have a stable production. And as we saw in the presentation as well, we are in a really high level of shares of production within specification, and that's really, as I would say, better than expected. And we see that production, we have high production and good production level in the bleaching line and also in the dryer line. And what we're focused on right now is the dissolving loop. And we are trying to get better productivity there. The process generates a lot of dust, and we have to take some shorter production stops to clean it. And that's what we're working on right now. And we see that we develop all the time, and it's most important part here that we see the problem, we solve them, but we also have solutions for the problems we see now, so we will continue and improve.
That is what I see is very impressive by the team. They see a problem, they solve it, and the problem doesn't come back. So that is impressive, and you know, it's just the plant is operational, it's just a matter of time. Okay, then maybe we should stop there, and we should also thank everyone from watching us online. Thank you so much for being with us. I hope you have got a lot of information. If there are other questions that you would like to ask, also if it comes up questions from the auditorium, please send them to us, to the email address, and we will continue answering those questions. We will answer all questions. Might take a day or two to answer them, but we will answer your questions. So looking forward to them. And thank you so much for the ones being online, and hoping to see you here next time. Thank you. Thank you. Then some